Papa John. Haven't been on the YouTube channel in quite a while, so I thought I'd put something together. I'm doing a little trip to a place called Cumberland Island. It's the last barrier island in Georgia before you get to Florida, and it's a national seashore. There's hardly any people there. It's about 13 miles long, and you got to take a boat to get there. There's no bridges, but it's a unique place. This is probably the 5th or 6th time I've been there, and every time I go it's just awesome. So I thought for you people that don't live around here, I thought I'd show you what this place looks like. There's the Cumberland Queen. That's how we get there. You got to buy a ticket to go over there, and you got to have reservations with the National Park Service. They only allow about 300 people a day, and as far as campsites, there's some campsites which I call luxury, which means they have a toilet and a shower and a little fresh water. And then there's the backcountry, which is where I'm headed, and there's not a lot of freshwater sources, but there's a few, so you just gotta carry the water that you need. So I'll be carrying a lot more than I usually do, but hey, I don't like being thirsty. This is what they call, I guess, main boulevard or the main drag on Cumberland Island. There's very few vehicles. The vehicles are Ranger vehicles and things like that. This time last year I was still in Georgia. I was probably finishing up Georgia, and it was cold. It's cold every day. Your hands are cold, you're wet. It's just, this is so much nicer. It's about 60 degrees, and I mean, look at the scenery. It's just beautiful. Still walking. It hasn't been that long. I'm headed south. This main road just runs north to south. The island's about 13 miles long, and they drop you off at the, I guess it's called Sea Camp Station, and to walk down to the ruins, it's about a mile. So I'm headed south down to the Dungeness ruins. And a little history on the island. There were Native Americans living here. They were called Timucuans, and those people occupied this area in Jacksonville and over towards Gainesville, Florida. And they were, as they say, were pretty peaceful people. And the Spaniards came and built a fort here, and the diseases from the Europeans kind of were not very beneficial for the Native Americans, but they lived here. The earliest record's like 2000 BC, so they'd lived here like 3,500 years before Europeans got here. But right now we're walking down to the Dungeness ruins, which are ruins of a mansion and setup that the Carnegies, they used to own the island. Thomas Carnegie and his wife Lucy, and he's the brother of Andrew Carnegie, who I guess was the steel business person. But they all had money, and they ended up buying almost all of the island, maybe all of it. But they left it to their kids, and I think one of their kids still owns an inn on the island, but you can't get there except by boat. And they couldn't afford to upkeep everything on the island, so they ended up giving it to the U.S. government, and now it's national seashore, and nobody lives here. You can camp on here, though. You're only allowed to camp up to 7 nights. I'm going to camp 4 nights. The old gate's still here. I mean, I'm sure there were cars and horses and carriages and stuff pulling up here all the time back in the day. I forgot to mention there's some wild horses on the island. Quite a few of them, actually. They are wild, though, so be careful. These are the Dungeness grounds, and I was just thinking, you can see out into the marsh that way, and back this way is the old mansion. I was just thinking, how cool would it be to stealth camp right here? You can't, and you wouldn't be very stealthy, but it sure would be cool. The grounds that are cleared out probably cover, I don't know, 50 or 100 acres or something. This looks like an old greenhouse or maybe a place where animals were kept, but what's interesting is how they built these structures. They use oyster shells, and I believe this is called tabby, and it's used a lot here in the Gulf area because there's so many shells, but you know, putting it to good use. Unless you've been here before, it's hard to imagine how big it is. And that's the old burnt down mansion that burned down in 1959 or something. And over here was another building. It's ruins also, but it had billiard room, gun room, doctor's office, an apartment, a pool, a squash court, and I saw a couple of deer back here too, roaming around. The deer on the island, because it's not a big island and they can't really go anywhere, they don't get very big. They're kind of small. Deer is tasty though. My son hit like 3 deer in his car, not on purpose, but he cooked up some deer stew and it was pretty good. There are the deer. They're off in the woods. I don't know if you can see them. I'll walk that way and see if we can get close to them. They're probably pretty tame. Nobody hunts them out here. This is a cemetery at Dungeness, and Thomas Carnegie's here. He passed away when he was 42, which always amazes me. You can have all the money you'll ever need, but you never know how much time you're going to get. And this here is the gravesite of General Henry Lee, Light Horse Henry Lee, I think they called him, but he was a Revolutionary War hero, but he's also the father of Robert E. Lee, who was the general for the Confederate Army. That's kind of interesting that he died here on Cumberland Island. They later moved his body to Virginia, I think after about 100 years, but yep, even the wealthy, they all wind up here too. What's up, buddy? There is the armadillo. This is Nightingale Trail. It's supposed to be the prettiest trail on the island. I generally like to stay on the main drag because a lot less chance of... There's some horse poop, man. I remember all that moose poop up in Maine, but these horses can bring it. But I like to stay on the main drag because less chance of getting ticks. But this is a pretty wide path, so I don't think there's a big chance of ticks here. I did treat my stuff with permethrin, and it is cooler temperatures, so I should be fine. But what's cool about Nightingale Trail is it's on the southern end of the island, and there's lots of live oaks with the moss hanging down, and I don't think a lot of people take these trails, so it'd be pretty peaceful and quiet, and I might see some animals. So far I've seen a deer, well, some deer, some horses, and an armadillo. Lots of birds. There's some eagles here, some bald eagles flying around. But this place is pretty cool. So this is kind of cool, walking along the trail with the live oaks and the Spanish moss. So I'm headed kind of northwest, but you can see to my right the sand dunes, because the ocean's out there to my right, and the sand dunes here are huge. I mean, the beach must be 100 to 300 yards wide in some spots when you count the sand dunes. The dunes are huge. I'll probably get some video of it. Oh, looks like I'm coming up on one now. So I stay to the left, but if you go to the right, let's take a little peek. All right, let's see what's up here. I can't resist, man. I can't resist. Okay. You can see the ocean off in the distance, but you can see how wide the sand dunes are here. Well, almost to the destination for the day. Probably hiked about 10 miles. You can see the live oaks are giving way to some pines, and I think that will continue to happen as we go north. I really miss the quiet. When I'm at home, I don't hear the quiet. It happens when there's a 4-year-old running around, but it's all good. I miss the quiet of just being out in the woods, and I could hear some noise in the distance and realize it's actually the surf, and it's probably a quarter mile away, maybe a little more. But the quiet solitude, man, it's awesome. So I've seen a few animals, armadillos and deer and stuff, but I hear there's some wild boar out here. I've never seen one out here in the on the island, and I kind of wonder how they got here. But I imagine somebody had some pigs over here and some of them got loose, and that's where the wild boar comes from. Anyway, you can see the pine, which is kind of cool too. I do like those live oaks, though. There's the live oak. Anyway, I'll check in a little later. Ooh, I think I saw a little bobcat. There are a few houses on the island, so I mean it could have been somebody's big house cat, but I think it's just back here on the trail, not close to any house. I think it might have been a bobcat. That is cool. Not a bad water source. I got some aqua mira. I've smelled water here on the island. It smells kind of sulfury, but at Plum Orchard, where we're going tomorrow, they should have some clean drinking water. Site number 4. So here at Stafford, you make reservations and get a site. And this is site number 4, which is mine for the night, but you can fit 6 people here. It's just me, but and I think the next one, the one next to me, is closed. Look at that, they got a bear box. I don't have to hang a bear bag. That's pretty cool. So this is my campsite. Perfect. I can hear the ocean. Got a bear box. I'm set. I got a liter and a half of water. No worries, man. No worries. Well, as you leave Stafford Campground, it's a little bit of a hike to get to the beach. You have to hike through the dunes, and that's what I was telling you. These dunes, huge. They're huge. So I'm gonna see what it looks like. Oh man, I got a ways to go before I get to the ocean. I can hear it. Okay, how cool would it be to stealth camp here? Not gonna do it though, because I'm just glad they let us come to the island. Okay, looks like we're set up for the night. Not gonna eat that much. Got a little stuff in my food bag. Not gonna make a fire. Just gonna sit here and enjoy it. It's not cold out tonight. It's probably 60 or 65. Probably drop down to about 50. In hiker terms, that's pretty much perfect weather. I don't think it's gonna rain. We'll just pack up and get up to Plum Orchard tomorrow, and we're going to be camping out by the river, by the back side of the island. Right now we're on the front side of the island, which is the Atlantic Ocean, and I'll be back here in a couple of days.
The moon is the hope of the night. Music is all that is right. In the morning I waited on San Pedro Square. Sound of church bells, churangos, and children filled the air. Then I heard a girl laughing. She sounded like you, Esmeralda. But you were not there, Esmeralda. Does your dream board away with his flash spats, brass gramophone? Esmeralda, as your steamboat set sail, the fair Amazonian swan. If the band plays Bon Voyage out of time, out of tune, in minor tone, you can lay all the blame on my drunken trombone.